Welcome, welcome. A new month, May, is already upon us, but let's take a look back and see what I read this April. There are so many hotly anticipated summer romance novels that already came out in April, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of already burned through some of them. I just could not wait until summer to devour them. I had to know what the new Abby Jimenez and the new Emily Henry were all about. So we will get to my thoughts on those summer romance books in just a bit. My first book that I read this April is Bob the Drag Queen's debut novel, Harriet Tubman Live in Concert. So with this book, you kind of just have to go with the premise. It is not explained at all. Basically, historical figures just come back to life. And Harriet Tubman is not the only historical figure who comes back. Like they mentioned Cleopatra, and she's this super rich influencer and things like that. So Harriet Tubman, though, she feels like the best way to speak to the youth of today is through music. So she hires a music producer to help out. And so much of the book is actually about the producer and a little bit less about her. Like in the beginning, it's all about Harriet Tubman and the concert she wants to put on. But as you get through the book, it just becomes more about the producer, his life, and his past. I really enjoyed the bits that had Harriet Tubman involved in what was happening in the process. So this book is a really short read. I really enjoyed the beginning. I thought it was really funny. There are some great quotes. I give it 3.5 stars. After that, I read Passion Project, which is a debut novel by London Sperry. Now, this book was my most emotional of the bunch by far. This is a romance book, and it is supposed to give you that big emotional punch. The female main character in this book, Bennett, had a boyfriend through her college years who died. It's been a few years, but she's having a hard time working through her grief. So her roommate pushes her into trying online dating just to kind of get her out and about a little bit, just more so to get her out of the apartment. But she can't really go through with it. She ends up standing up the guy named Henry. They run into each other, though, after she ends up ghosting him, and he sees she's in pain. He tries to be her friend, and he gently kind of nudges her into trying some adventures around town, just as a friend, just to kind of get her out a little bit more. So this book hit me really hard. I also have been through the same type of a loss that Bennett has been through. And the men featured in this book had kind of a lot in common with that real life person for me. So I was definitely more emotional this book than I think maybe the average reader would be. So for me, this book kind of holds a really big place in my heart. I'm probably much more attached to it than others would be, just because of my own personal experiences and how it really just hit me emotionally. So I would say it definitely clouds my review of this book, because for me, it's going to be a 5 stars no matter what. I feel like probably if I wasn't as emotionally attached to it, it'd probably be about a 4.5. It is very similar to Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone. So I would say if you really liked that book, you should definitely check this one out as well. And it was my favorite romance book that I read this month, even though Abby Jimenez and Emily Henry had their new books out. So speaking of Abby Jimenez, the next book I read after that was Say You'll Remember Me. It is not my favorite book of hers, but I didn't think it was awful by any means. There were just some things that I didn't quite enjoy about it. So this book is a bit different. It is a long-distance romance book. The main characters meet right before the female main character, Samantha, ends up moving from Minnesota back to her family's home in California to help take care of her mom, who has early onset dementia. And apparently their date was so good that they sort of try to keep things going and keep seeing each other, and it kind of goes from there. So I thought the book was fine. Like with all of her books, there are emotional hardships. I did think it was interesting that she tried something new, working through this sort of long distance romance. And I did like that you got to know a bit more about their individual family dynamics. However, because this relationship is long distance, they don't get a ton of time together. And they get really serious really fast. Like they've only met in person a few times before they're like in a relationship together and thinking about what happens next. And it definitely felt like the main male character was definitely more pushing her into continuing this relationship than maybe she was wanting to. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And I was cringing at a bit of the dialogue too. So if you're an Abby fan, I definitely say read it, make up your own mind. I give it 3.5 stars. Then I wanted to work in a book from my backlist. So I worked in Pizza Girl, which is supposed to be kind of like a weird girl book, if you've ever sort of heard of that category. For the majority of this book, I liked it. It is about a young woman who is pregnant. She works as a pizza delivery driver and strikes up this sort of friendship with a female customer who is a bit older, is married, and has a kid. But towards the end, things go like really far off the rails. and kind of brought down my rating because of that, because it wasn't really in a good way. So I give it 3 stars. Then I decided to delve a bit into horror and read Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. It's a book that came out earlier this year, and it follows a guy whose family he has been losing to the conservative leaning 24-hour news channel that they watch. So they start saying weird things about kind of like a great awakening. And when he goes to try and check on them, he finds that their house is rotting and like their hygiene is out the window. So it's really gross. They're kind of in this like trance watching TV and end up violently trying to attack him. So the book alternates perspectives of different members of this family who have kind of been like possessed, not always by conservative talk TV either. There's also like wellness influencers that kind of influence one of the characters, as well as like porn and bots influencing a different character. So the book culminates basically in this like apocalypse. So I've been trying my hand a bit more at horror, just trying to broaden my horizons a bit. But this one had some really gory bits. I kind of needed to like set it down for a little bit, have some time away from it before going back to it. So I don't know if horror is maybe really my genre. Kind of depends on the book. I don't like a ton of gore in my books. So I think if you're a horror fan, you'll probably enjoy this book a bit more than I did. I gave it 3 stars. So after the horror book, I wanted to cleanse my palate a little bit and went back to romance with Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. This is a book that came out last year. So it follows 2 classical musicians who are part of the same orchestra and they're like musical prodigies. So they're sort of competitive with each other, but the competition is like also kind of a turn on for them. So again, not a bad book. Honestly, I didn't really like the male main character. Like he was fine. He was just not really the type of character that like I would be attracted to. But to each their own. I gave this one also 3.5 stars. So then Emily Henry's next book came out, Great Big Beautiful Life. So I knew going into this book based on the early reviews that it was supposed to be a little bit different than her other adult romance books. That it was supposed to be a little bit less about the romance and a bit more about sort of the contemporary fiction aspects to it. And that I really did not mind at all. I felt like these 2 characters, they had a big thing going on in their life. And so, of course, they spent a lot of time paying attention to that in addition to having this sort of budding romance going on. So the 2 main characters, they compete to be the writer selected to write the memoir of a reclusive socialite that fell out of the public eye like 20 years prior. So a lot of this story is about the socialite and about this competition that they're sort of going through. The pace did move a bit slow, but honestly, I enjoyed that. I was kind of like savoring that. I enjoyed the banter between the 2 main characters. It was heading to a 4-star for me, but then the final chapter gave me a little bit of whiplash. No spoilers, obviously, won't tell you what happened, but it left me with some questions, and so I put it down to 3.5 stars. And finally, to close out the month, I read my TBR jar pick for April, which was The Serpent and the Wolf. This is a romantasy that came out last year, and it leans a bit harder on fantasy than some of the other romantasy books that I've seen come out lately. Vasa is a princess who is married off to the ruler of a different country within this world as a means to keep political peace. However, on the night of their wedding, she nearly kills the man, escapes. He ends up tracking her down and finding her, and they come to an agreement that she will play the part of his wife for a few years to help him win his next election, and then he will let her go free. So throughout this time, she has like magic rising up within her, finds it difficult to control, and he pledges that he will help her control her magic in exchange for her helping him. So this book has political intrigue. It is a bit more of a slow burn romance, but when it gets good, it gets good. So I thought it was a solid debut by Rebecca Robinson. It is the first in a series. I will definitely check out the next book. I hear it's supposed to be a trilogy. I have not seen any details on when the next book will be released, but I will definitely be checking out because I thought this was a really interesting book. So I give it 4 stars. So that is what I read this April. Because we're a few days into May, I've already read a few books that will be featured in what I read next month. However, if you are interested in Julie Chan is Dead and Enchantra and would like to know my thoughts on those books, you can head to my Instagram page at BookTrovertBliss. You can also find the link to my Instagram in the YouTube description. So if you want to check out those reviews a little bit early, you can go ahead and follow me over there. But otherwise, I will discuss those books and a few others in my May wrap-up coming out next month. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and yeah, join me on my other socials at Booktrovertbliss over there as well. Happy reading this May, everyone!